Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
Hello. This is an e-commerce conversation for Practical E-Commerce, and I am Armando Roggio. Images are vital for e-commerce. Shoppers are going to be very reluctant to go to your web store and pick out an item based on text only. Okay, they're not going to make a purchase that way. Rather, if you want to earn online sales, you need to do your best to show shoppers what products look like. So again, those images are vital for e-commerce, and not just your products, right? If you want to connect and engage shoppers, you're going to need to use lifestyle images throughout your website, on your homepage, category pages, and campaign landing pages. But here's the challenge. Are you really optimizing those images for the best performance, the best SEO? Because remember, SEO and performance are tied together. We're going to explore this topic today with Chris Zacharias. He is the founder and CEO of Imgix, and hopefully I'm saying that right. Chris, am I saying that right?
You are saying that correctly.
Perfect. Prior to that, Chris, who you've just heard, was one of YouTube's earliest web developers. He created YouTube's HTML5 video player, which I think I personally use every day, and Feather, an ultralight version of YouTube that loads quickly in parts of the world with slow internet connection. So he's got a lot of experience thinking about how to provide rich internet experiences without sort of burdening a person's client. So without further ado, and actually I'm going to take a step back, I guess, and without addressing performance or SEO yet, Chris, why do you believe that images are important for an e-commerce company?
Well, I mean, they're the first sort of interaction you have with your end users, right? Like images register in your brain far faster than people reading text, right? So if you want to make a great first impression, you have to have great images, and they need to load very quickly for your products to kind of register in the minds of your consumers. So that's why they're super important. I mean, that's really the crux of it. The internet as a whole has become increasingly image-centric, and that's how you sell your product.
So I completely agree with you. And actually, earlier today, I put a couple of websites that I helped to manage through, I believe it was a page weight tool that you guys have on your website. So I saw in that a lot of the images I had actually were a lot of the weight on the page. So to kind of move our conversation forward a little bit, describe, if you will, how site performance, first of all, I guess how site performance impacts e-commerce. So if I've got a great looking image, but it's loading slow, how's that going to affect my ability to convert?
Well, I mean, people will bounce off your website pretty quickly. I mean, Akamai found that people will bounce off your website 56% of the time, or 56% more often for every 1 second of additional load time. So you really don't want that to happen, right? Like you want your consumers to stick around. And this is becoming increasingly difficult to handle on mobile because you have these mobile devices that are constantly moving in and out of low or high quality networks. And so if someone's in their car or on the bus and they're trying to make a purchasing decision and their network's dropping in and out, you really want the content to still arrive somehow. And so, basically, if you do not handle this problem, you're going to be sending images that are too big and people will just abandon. And that's a big problem for e-commerce, especially when it comes to mobile. But it's also a big problem on the web.
This last weekend, I was actually at a conference in Minnesota, and I was inside of a building, and I had set myself up on their Wi-Fi. And I walked out of that building, and we started to go down the road a little ways, and my phone obviously my mobile switched over from Wi-Fi to the local network. It was a ton slower, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I started to get a lot of latency on the pages that I was looking at. So what you're saying is that experience is not, first of all, not uncommon. I know it's not. But obviously that's going to impact whether or not I can finish a purchase even, right? Because that image or something loading on the page could make the page non-responsive.
Exactly. And I mean, and there's other sort of cascading effects too. I mean, like other countries, for instance, have, disproportionately smaller amounts of bandwidth going around or performant bandwidth. So like if you're trying to reach into some of these international markets, you could be missing out on massive opportunities just because you haven't optimized your site for them. I remember, one of the things that I was primarily focused on at YouTube was, trying to get the web page down in size, because every time we did, it would open up and expand markets for us. And that resonates even more when you're trying to sell a product, not just show video views.
So I guess without talking to us right now about your own product and how you've solved that problem, what are some things that an online retailer can do to optimize images, so that they are getting better conversion, but they're still providing a good user experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing you can do is make sure that your images actually fit the use case that you're trying to target. So what does that mean? It means, not serving a high resolution photo to a mobile device unless you absolutely have to, right? Like, you want it to be at the highest resolution that user needs to be able to see the image, in the best possible light without having to send any additional data, right? The kind of photos that you like, for instance, just as an example that I use all the time, the photo you take on your iPhone, it's actually a gigantic photo. You could print it out and put it on a billboard just like Apple does every day here in San Francisco, right? Those photos are that high resolution. You don't need to serve that high of a resolution down to your mobile device for an e-commerce website, right? So if you're not resizing and cropping that photo down to something that is, web-centric, you're just shipping a huge amount of information to your end user that they'll never see anyway.
Okay.
So the best thing you can do just from the very beginning, resize and crop your images. Next to that is also making sure you use the right format for your image content, because if you do not use the right formats, you're going to serve even more image content down the wire that you don't need to serve down the wire. And this is something that is very complicated to do these days because the different devices support different formats. So you have to have some degree of sophistication in picking which formats you're going to serve down the wire at any moment in time. But when you do that correctly, you can save 30 or 40% of your bandwidth, which translates into faster site load time, faster app load time, better conversion rates, and all of the nice to haves that you want as an e-commerce site.
Sure.
And then finally, getting your colors and stuff correct. I mean, this is going to be a very big deal in the very near future when Apple moves forward with their wide gamut support for colors. But just in general, when you resize images down, they tend to become grayer. Just by the inherent way that these resizing algorithms work, they can dull or mute some of the colors in your photos, and you really want to make those colors pop because you want to have that initial resonance in the mind of the consumer. And so you want to go back and kind of, once you've resized them, adjust those colors and tweak them properly so that they actually still have that punch that you're looking for.
Okay.
These are in my mind, those are the three big things you should really focus on as an e-commerce website or mobile app.
So going back to the format for a second, just to make it really clear for everybody listening. So, for example, I will often tell people that they should be considering a WebP format versus maybe a JPEG, or a PNG versus maybe a JPEG. That's what you're talking about there in terms of the, okay. So you're suggesting not just figuring out, which one of those to use overall, but deciding which format to use based on the device or the client the customer's using. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the WebP format only really works on Chrome devices at the moment, correct? And so, you can only serve it down the wire to Android devices and expect it to show up. Certain JPEG encodings are better than other JPEG encodings. PNG tends to be very, very high resolution and lossless, which is great for the highest resolution of image content, but it's also the heaviest. And then there's a myriad other formats that are sort of emerging as we speak that people are increasingly using to get even better compression ratios of higher resolution. That your average e-commerce company who's primarily focused on selling products is not going to have the sophistication to kind of just be aware of constantly, right? It's not their domain expertise, or should it be? These formats are very nuanced, but they're very powerful.
Sure.
So you'll see some new formats coming out, like Google's Razor format, which is kind of a combination of machine learned algorithms and image formats. And it's crazy new technology, but it's getting, 75% cuts in bandwidth, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what devices
impressive.
is that, again, just like Chrome and Android devices, or is that something that's going to be picked up by other browsers?
I would hope it gets picked up by everybody, but right now it's still very much just a white paper. Google's starting to roll it out on their photo products, and so it's very much proprietary at the moment. But it is an impressive sort of combination of today's image formats and our, Google's collective machine learning intelligence operating on them. It's almost like the machines are inventing their own image format on the fly, specific to that image. That's kind of the simplest way I can kind of explain it.
Okay.
Which is fascinating, but it means you need to have some sophistication to take advantage of it.
So I just want to reiterate then the three things that you said. So go back through those, just bullet point them for us, the three areas that we can sort of improve image performance.
Sure. So, when we're talking about performance, we're not just talking about time to load and all that kind of stuff, but that is a critical component. I'm also talking about just increasing conversions as well, right?
Right.
There are many dimensions to that. But the three that I was mentioning were sizing the image correctly. If your mobile device is 320 by 960 or something like that, make sure that the image is smaller than that, or is that size. Otherwise, you're serving too much information. The second thing is picking the right image format, and that's a pretty dynamic question these days. You can get by and be pretty successful just by using JPEGs, but you'll do much better if you can have the sophistication to use technologies like WebP and to be set up to start using new formats as they kind of emerge.
Sure.
And then third is making sure that you have some measure of control over the colors and how you present those images down the wire. So, making sure that as you manipulate these images to make them more e-commerce compatible or more e-commerce forward, that you're not losing your color, you're not muting out tones that are like give your product photos that punch that you're looking for. Like you really want them to resonate in the minds of your consumers. So it's really critical to get those colors to pop effectively.
Okay. So tell me, what is it that your company does to address those three things? And then I'm going to add a little bit onto that. And, are there options? With your company, other companies in the industry that can make it pretty simple to really optimize and manage these images?
Absolutely, sure. So what we provide is a platform for manipulating images in real time so that you don't have to do that work in your own servers. So effectively what that means is you have some high quality, high resolution photographs that you want to display on your e-commerce site or whatever site. And you have them stored, you upload them onto the internet somewhere. Prototypically, that's to some sort of digital asset management solution, website, or like an Amazon S3 bucket. And instead of having to process those images yourself, either manually in Photoshop or writing some scripts to do it, you can have us connect to it for you. And we work with you to set that up. And by connecting it to us, we then give you a way to serve your images dynamically. And so what does that mean? That means that you can ask for that image back in whatever size you need, right? So you can say, I want that image as a 400 by 400 pixel square. I want it cropped so that all the faces are preserved. And I want to, punch up the vibrancy of the image by, 10%. And you can do all of that on demand. So just by kind of editing the image call, you can add whatever sophistication you want based on, what you need at that moment in time. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to experiment and kind of really hone in on what images your website should be showing. And then on top of that, we provide ways of making it even more dynamic so that we can respond to the environment that you're in. So if your consumers are looking at your images on an Android device, we will serve them a WebP image. If they're looking at it on an iPhone device, we'll serve down a JPEG image. It's the same image that you've uploaded one image. We're still serving the content from that image, but we're doing all the manipulation, all of the transformations to make it e-commerce forward in that situation.
Are you changing
There's
like
a second part. Yeah.
I didn't, but just thought. Hopefully, I'm not interrupted. But are you changing the compression ratio
No.
to accommodate for the network speed that I'm on? Earlier, we were talking about when you start to have a poor reception. Is that what you're doing as well?
Well, so there's new. So basically, we are set up to handle any signals that come along. So there's an increasing number of signals that are being sent back by the mobile device developers and the websites themselves that indicate sort of what the current network performance is. So we have some tools in place to like adjust the compression based on your specification. Mm-hmm. And increasingly, as these new things become standardized, we can actually respond dynamically to what the browser or mobile device is actually reporting to us. So if they're saying, hey, you're on a 2G network in sub-Saharan Africa or something, we can send you down a lower resolution image. As opposed to like if you're in a major metropolitan area like Singapore, we can send you down, a very high resolution image because the network latency is almost nothing.
Sure.
And so, yeah, we can respond to those signals. Really where the challenge is right now is that, getting those signals from the mobile developers themselves is, there's a lot of things in flux right now as the various interested parties like Apple and Google and Microsoft are all kind of implementing their own solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And please go on. I sort of interrupted your flow there a little bit, but please go on.
Oh, no, that was basically the end of what I was saying in terms of like, we are kind of operating, like we're trying to take that headache out of the hands of people who are trying to run a business that involves image content, sure. Right? So we pay close attention to all the developments that are happening in the image market, like how the browsers are developing, how the mobile devices are developing, what are the new techniques and technologies that are being leveraged or introduced into the market. Mm-hmm. We try to abstract that all away so that, instead of having to worry about, network, the network performance of your mobile device, you could just say, let Imgix handle it. Tell us to automatically compress according to our best guess or best estimates according to what we're seeing come back from the browser. And that takes a huge load off of people who are trying to optimize their web properties or mobile properties.
Sure. And what it reminds me of a little bit, and I think I know you're going to be familiar with this practice, but many e-commerce companies right now, like I write in PHP a lot, so it's not uncommon to upload an image and then use ImageMagick or GD and make like 30 versions of that. This is the thumbnail in this situation, and really having to think about all the different sizes, all different compressions that I need to make, and then how to add those to the website. But if I'm following you, what you're saying is that the tools, your tool and perhaps other tools, are kind of moving in the direction of, hey, here's just the URL for the image, maybe with some instructions passed, and it's going to serve the right image for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like just trying to even figure out what those 30 images need to be these days is getting so hard. Just given the fact that like every 6 months, there's like a new Apple product coming out that's going to revolutionize everything.
Right.
And then Google is constantly changing, how Android handles a lot of their image content as they're evolving their own internal products. And so, those 30 images 6 months from now might need to be a different 30 images, or might need to be those 30 images plus 20 more, just to handle the current world, the current mobile landscape and device landscape. So by doing the work dynamically and doing it on demand, we can, kind of systematically address whatever needs the market's asking for at that moment in time, mm-hmm. And serve that content out, right? And then as, say, like low-resolution versions of the image are no longer needed because, the whole world is now collectively upgraded to some level, those images actually fall away from us. So we don't serve them anymore. And once we stop serving them, they kind of, in our minds, disappear, even though we could regenerate them at any moment in time. So sure. Doing it dynamically means that you're constantly serving exactly what your users want to see, which is pretty cool. And that means that anytime a new device, like when Apple launches a new iPhone and it has a new pixel ratio that you want to support, we support it on day one, right? Like automatically. In fact, you might not even have to change your code at all and just to get support for that immediately.
Right.
Because it's done dynamically.
What do you guys recommend for the starting image, right? So if I'm going to be doing, e-commerce, what's the resolution I should start with, knowing that I'm going to probably be generating all these different versions of it?
I mean, I would argue that the vast majority of companies are not going to need to impose any limit on the image or format. Like anything that's, I would say, less than 100 megabytes in size is probably ideal for us. So like we like working from the original image content as much as possible because we can learn as much as we can from that image.
Okay.
So, like pre-signing the image down is not like the best practice. We don't advise that. We actually advise people give us the most original file you can, because there's a lot of information, hidden in those pixels that we can use to improve the output image that we're going to serve down the wire to your customers.
So basically, I'm going to take this with my DSLR or something like that, just upload that, and then know that.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, we want that. I mean, like if we can get that image, like the sort of more original asset we can get, including all the metadata and all the stuff that came with it, so that we can make intelligent, informed decisions off of those. Those to us are signals, right? Like, getting the metadata and understanding sort of like what camera took this photo, how, like what were the conditions where this photo was taken by, what was the aperture, what was the film speed, all that kind of stuff. If we have that information, we can kind of reverse approximate sort of what's going on in the image or try to understand a little bit more about what's in the image. Mm-hmm. When you put it through like a processor like Photoshop or something like that and pre-size it down, we actually often lose a lot of that information, and the information doesn't make sense in the context of the original photo. So, we actually lose some of those signals. So the more original information we can get access to, the better off we can optimize your images. So we encourage people to just give us the originals. I don't think we've ever found a customer yet, and we've had some very large images go through us, like 2 gigabyte photos. That's not necessarily the most fun, but we deal with it. Like, I don't think anybody, most e-commerce, I don't think we've ever had an e-commerce site push an image that large through us.
Okay. I guess as we're sort of nearing the end of our time here, when I started to introduce you, I mentioned a project that you had worked on, I believe, with YouTube called Feather, and I thought it was interesting. I actually did a little bit of looking into it on Google earlier. I was hoping that you would just take a minute and describe Feather for those listeners, and then maybe kind of connect that to the work that you do now, if you can.
Absolutely. So sort of in my last year at YouTube, when I was, I pretty much worked on every sort of angle of the website in one form or another. One of the engineers was kind of lamenting the fact that our web page had grown to be about 1.2, 1.3 megabytes in size. And he sort of issued a challenge where he said, if they can make a quick clone in less than 100 kilobytes, we should certainly be able to serve YouTube in less than 100 kilobytes without the video. And so I kind of took that as my personal mission for a new project over there. And that became what is Feather. And so the motivation of Feather was to create a hyper lightweight version of YouTube that would fit in less than 100 kilobytes. And it took a bunch of technologies to be able to deliver that kind of experience. But what I effectively did was cut down the page weight. I cut down the functionality. We migrated it to use the HTML5 video player, and eventually kind of limboed underneath that 100 kilobyte limit. And what was fascinating about that was just, it loaded so quickly. And when we pushed it out into the world, we made it sort of an opt-in version of YouTube. And what really struck us at the time is we pushed it out as an experiment, and suddenly we started seeing our latency numbers increase, which means like technically YouTube got slower. And it took us a long time. It took us like a couple days to figure out why. And what actually had happened is we had suddenly opened up parts of the world that we'd never been able to reach before with Feather. So people who were trying to load that 1.2 megabyte web page couldn't load it in like sub-Saharan Africa or rural Siberia or, the outskirts of India, these places that have very, very slow internet connections. But with Feather, they could for the first time. And so they were watching YouTube videos, which is really fascinating. And so that really led me down this path of discovery around sort of web performance and how, the different components of a web page play a role in how people access the content, because we're kind of spoiled here in the United States and places like Europe and parts of Asia where we have really good bandwidth. But, in these other areas, they just don't have that bandwidth. And, what contributes to page load performance in most cases is the visual media content itself. So that's where I became very much invested in understanding how visual media on the web operates. And while it didn't directly translate into founding Imgix, it was sort of the initial seed in my brain where I started trying to understand where we came from, why we ended up in this situation with visual media on the internet. The images were never actually even intended to be on the internet. It was only 1993 when Mark Andreessen introduced it as a tag for HTML that they really gained a footing on the internet. And so, kind of going all the way back to the roots and understanding where images came from, how they got on the web, how we treat them today, and where they need to go in the future, and how that can actually benefit people around the world is ultimately where the idea of Imgix came from. So Feather was sort of the spiritual successor or predecessor to Imgix in a weird way.
No, it actually makes a lot of sense. At least I can see the connection for it. And I appreciate you, Chris, coming on today to talk about this. I think the 3 points that you made were very, very good about optimizing images. I personally think images are vital, like I said at the beginning, to e-commerce. And what I really like about your product is it's a tool out there to help businesses, and I'm even thinking smaller businesses, mid-market businesses that might not have the software development resources to do these kinds of things on their own. You're really giving them a way to compete with others. And I'm going to guess that you've got some competitors out there. We always try on e-commerce conversations not to just make this about a product, but optimizing the performance of the images, I think, is key as these smaller and mid-market companies try to compete with the biggest enterprises out there on e-commerce. I hope you agree with that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there are competitors out there, and in my mind, just making the web faster in general, despite who it is, that benefits everybody. So just getting more and more people to understand why this stuff matters is significant.
Thank you very much for your time. I absolutely agree with you, and thank you everyone for listening, and hopefully we'll find you again on another e-commerce conversation.